Welcome to the Music Reel. I'm your host, Nicola Burton. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Rob Cannon. Now, Rob is a specialist in the arts, entertainment and creative industries who works as a coach and an educator. Rob, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today. How are you going?
Great, yeah, not too bad. Surviving it all, thankfully.
Surviving it all, exactly. What else can we really say at a time like this?
Absolutely, one day at a time, right?
Well, now, Paul Saint-Hilaire sent me this amazing book, Musicians and Addiction, a few months ago. Yep. As you can see, I've got my little notes. I love this book. I think anyone in this industry really needs to read this book in order to understand, the challenges that we've had for a long time. Yep. And what's amazing is that your section was the one that stood out for me. So sports science and psychology for musicians. And why it stood out was I really loved the fact that you talked about a musician as an elite athlete, and your strategy was to identify their peak performance profile. Now, I've been an agent for 30 years, and to me, that is the smartest, most intelligent thing I think anyone's ever talked about. And I just love it. I cannot wait to talk to you about this today. Now, let's start with you. I want to hear, I guess, your story, in particular with arts, what your experience is with arts and entertainment, and then why you found yourself or how you found yourself working in this industry as a coach. I'd love to hear it. So over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, I started my journey in music as a teenager who was a massive music fan. I played music. I still play instruments. I play the piano. I play the guitar. I played in bands. I wanted to be in band. Well, I was in bands. I wanted to, work in music in some capacity. And I guess that career aspiration led me into the recording side of the music industry. And I spent a good decade working in major record labels in London, where I'm from originally, and that took me out to New York. And then actually a major label gig brought me out to Sydney. And I still do a lot of work on a sort of consultancy basis with major labels. And I, through that process, became interested in, I suppose, looking at kind of artists' careers beyond what I was doing at the label. I worked very closely with artists, and particularly in the course of them sort of getting out on the road and promoting records and all the rest of it. So that really made me think about, how I could work with artists to get the most out of them and to help them get the most out of themselves. I moved into the educational side of things, and I've spent, quite a number of years now working in a sort of a formal educational capacity. And through that whole journey, I sort of got more and more interested in the psychological side of what we were doing. And I got involved in coaching, began a bunch of coaching work, studied coaching and coaching psychology. And my thinking was always coming back to the career I was in, the profession I loved, music and the creative arts and creative industries. And so a lot of the stuff that I was learning and working with and surrounded with in terms of sort of coaching and psychology, that often pertains to other fields, be it a clinical field or the business field, or in the case of performance psychology, it's really coming out of sport and thinking about how that pertained to the creative arts. And, as you say, thinking about a performing musician as an athlete made a lot of sense to me. I mean, the rigors that musicians and artists and creatives go through in the performance space, whether it's a one-off or a tour or whatever, I mean, you have to really think about how you're going to approach that. And this is what, sports psychology has been doing for decades. So I thought it was fascinating to really try and take some of those principles and those learnings and apply them into the arts with creatives and musicians. And I think it's a great approach.
I think it is, because to get artists into a positive mindset is the best way to facilitate them through their music career, right? Because there's so many challenges that they have to deal with that an ordinary 9-to-5 job doesn't have to deal with.
Absolutely.
But before they even get on stage, there's, probably on stage is the 5% you see, and there's the 95% that happens before they even get there. Right. So what I really loved was how positive your section was. And so I've written it down here. So the technical, tactical, physical, and psychological performance. That makes so much sense. It's so simple. So I thought I'd ask you, in your work with artists, have there been any patterns that have emerged as a result of the work in terms of performing artists that you can sort of talk about now?
Well, I think one of the things that, often emerges right at the start of the process is just sort of overcoming some of the barriers, I suppose, to thinking this sort of clinically about the process. I think the arts generally, in so many avenues of creativity, we sort of view as being these spontaneous eruptions of expression and what have you, and thinking too clinically and methodically and just kind of like head down, bum up, just do the same thing over and over again is kind of slightly anathema to that. So, just introducing the whole idea of the fact that, we need to be disciplined. We need to just really be very sort of clinical about how we break down what's going on in the pre-performance space, during the performance, after the performance, in the post-performance space, analyze it, identify what is happening, and then be really mindful about putting programs in place to support that. It sounds far too sort of clinical for something that should be as free-flowing and spontaneous and kind of expressive and creative as performing arts, but overcoming that and really seeing the performance space in that way, I think is really important, and that comes up time and time again. It's almost that educational piece to sort of bring people into what we're doing is a pattern I see.
I love it because it makes total sense to me, because if you've got a structure that can look after that bit, you're free to then go and create over here. So it actually kind of makes sense to compartmentalize it. So I thought, look, here we are.
Yeah.
We're still in a bit of a twilight zone.
Yeah.
So in Brisbane, we've got, I think, between 60 and 100 people that can be in a venue. Right. We can't have the tours, we can't have the concerts, we can't have the festivals. If you were going to talk to an emerging artist, someone who is leaving high school right now, and they said, I really want to be a musician, what would you talk? I mean, we shouldn't really laugh because we need people to continue to be in this industry, right?
We do, yeah.
How would we reframe what's happened this year and present to them in terms of the work that you do, in order, almost like a strategic framework to sort of say to them, you know what, guys, fantastic idea. Here's this. Yeah. What do you reckon?
It's an incredibly difficult question to answer. I mean, people have been affected in extraordinary ways, and there are no easy answers to it. I mean, I suppose some of the things that spring to my mind in a sort of a coaching sense are, firstly, to just examine every aspect of the situation, the predicament that one is in. And sometimes, that can be about defining who you are and what you're doing. And, sometimes that viewpoint of oneself just as a performer that has to perform in front of people can be, a narrow mindset that you can sort of break out of, and thinking about yourself as an entertainer, as a creator. If you start to sort of think about all the different labels and perspectives that you could apply to what you do and what you're aspiring to do, and then try and follow each one down a rabbit hole in terms of like, well, what can I do given the parameters that we face right now? That could lead to things that you could be doing, And I guess another thing, of course, is in terms of, sheer performance in and of itself, there's sort of two things that spring to mind. First is, of course, looking at all the innovative ways that you can try and continue to connect with audiences, whether it's, virtually or, in any other fashion that might sort of spring to mind. And the other thing, of course, is taking the time to go, well, if I'm not caught up in the rigors of being in a different town every night on tour, what are some of the things that I could do with that time that I do have on my hands to make, to work on my art, to work on my craft, but to also perhaps be mindful about some of the strategies around supporting my long-term career, that sort of thing. Those are sort of two approaches, but it's incredibly difficult. It really is.
So you're working with artists right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you'd have quite a bit on your plate trying to sort of, I guess, help them navigate through this insane time that none of us would have predicted. I mean, I guess the challenge is for our industry is we don't really know what the light at the end of the tunnel is yet, because the tunnel has disappeared and the light has changed colour. So we don't really know what's coming. Yep. And obviously, so we can still have little solo gigs. And what's really cool is that people are starting to create this appetite for actually paying to go and see bands, which is really, really cool. That wasn't as good before. Absolutely. But I think you're right when you say try and find that creative approach to life and look at your life like you're the creator of it, instead of going, getting depressed and saying, there's no point, seeing what you can create. So what's your vision this industry that you know so well. I'd be really curious to hear from you. You've had this really, really fascinating perspective on different sides of the industry.
Yeah.
What do you think, Rob? What do you think we're heading towards, and what's your vision for how we can leverage this challenge, make it our bitch, and actually really sort of help us to transform into something that we'd really like to do? Because given this book, we've got some challenges that we've got to deal with anyway. So how can we go, right, here's an opportunity. What can we do? What do you reckon?
Yeah, good question. And I think one of the things that you just said then, which I think is a really important point, is kind of changing what we take for granted, changing, how we as a general populace view what is available to us in our day-to-day consumption, whether it's in terms of, food that we can eat, restaurants we can go to, but also entertainment we can consume and what have you. And, we live in the age that we live in where so much that wasn't necessarily easily accessible to previous generations is accessible to us, and we take for granted, and now a lot of that is being taken away again. And so it's an opportunity for us collectively to really think about, well, what is valuable? What am I prepared to pay for? What do I want to pay for? What do I want to support? What do I want to see happen, and therefore go out and support? And then the flip side for the creators is to really enter into a dialogue, with that potential audience, and sort of, I suppose, try and co-create something out of us, what the ashes are that we are in at the moment. And through the history of our industry, there's always this tension between creativity and art as a pure concept of expression and creativity for the sake of creativity, and then the commercial side of things, which is like, how do I earn a living? How do I make money off my art? And how do the corporate, entities around that make money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I suppose you look at various eras through history, and that sort of tension goes back and forth, and it will always be there. But, this is really redefining some of that stuff. When you see companies, particularly in the live space, some of the biggest tour promoters in the world who are having extraordinary difficulty. 12 months ago, we all collectively in the music industry were going, like, those guys, they're the kings, that is the space where everybody wants to be, because that's where the money's at. And it shows you how quickly that can go away. And it's a chance to recalibrate what this means to us as creators, what this means to us as consumers, and the opportunity is there for new stuff to come to pass. What that may be, I don't know. And there has been a lot of experimenting, virtual concerts, socially distant concerts, there is a lot of opportunity to experiment, but I think the sort of the silver lining to it all is that it does reset some of the clock and allow these new things to sort of blossom, I suppose.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that I've spoken to have felt actually quite optimistic, which I know it sounds crazy, right? But it's like, you know what, there are a lot of problems anyway. Maybe this is a great opportunity. And as you say, that tension between music and business, working with that. And I liked what you said in terms of co-create. I think if we collaborate and co-create, we can actually do that reset. And those poor guys that have, who were at the top of the tree, who are they've got this massive debt burden. And it's just, my God, it's just awful for them. And you've got whole supply chains that may disappear if we don't get some help soon. So, what an interesting place to find ourselves in September 2020. Did you think New Year's Eve last year, right, wonder what 2020 is going to do? Yeah, it was not going to be this.
Yeah. I think one other thing just that springs to mind that I think is always important to add, particularly someone in my position and in these sorts of conversations, is that, and I do a lot of work with creativity as well. And one of the things about creativity and performance that comes through in the peak performance profile is kind of that notion of self-confident. You've got to have a certain amount of drive, a certain amount of self-belief, a certain amount of kind of, I will succeed no matter what. But there, of course, is a dark side to that. And it really is, important for all of us individually to have a sense of where that balance lies between going, this is my calling, this is what I'm great at, this is what I'm going to do. And let's just make sure that I take care of my business here. And therefore for a lot of, performing musicians, performing artists, like people in so many industries, at the moment, you might need to go, and we all need to just go, I'm not, you know, earning an income from what I was earning an income from 12 months ago and what I want to earn an income for. How do I just take care of, you know, my day-to-day for the here and now and steer back? So there is that balance that we've all got to take heed of. And I think sometimes, you know, in my role in the sort of the coaching space, it's about pumping up people's tires. It's about challenging them to find that self-belief. It's about challenging them to persevere. But I got to remember to sort of temper that with just a bit of reality and go, well, you know, let's not just run ourselves off the edge of the cliff because we've convinced ourselves that the parachute will definitely open.
Exactly. And again, you're right. It's about finding those transferable skills. Okay, I've got these skills as a musician. How can I use that in another aspect of business just in the meantime so that I can, you know, pay my mortgage, feed my kids, those kind of things. Yeah. So, yeah, well, look, Rob, what a great chat I've had with you. I really appreciate you sharing so much for people. I think anyone watching this, you're going to get them thinking, which is what we want. We want them to sort of look at this instead of doom and gloom. Okay, what's a different mindset, a different approach? So I'll put all your details in this because if someone wants to work with you, then at least they can actually find you, because now might be the time to actually, okay, I need some new strategies. Let's go and work with Rob so that when everything does return, and it will, I can actually, I'll have reappraised my whole approach to this industry. So look, thank you so much, Rob. I love your vision. I love, you know, the whole process that you're working with. This book changed my life, and in particular, your whole peak performance profile. I absolutely love it, and I really hope that people in our industry get behind this. I guess my vision, and don't laugh, I really hope that all agents and managers actually learn your approach and almost become coaches ourselves. I think we actually need that. I think that should be, you know, moving forward. If you want that license, you need to do this, because I think it would really help. So you might be very busy in the future.
That sounds good. Well, I'm here. I'm ready to go. So.
Wonderful. Rob Cannon, thank you so much for our chat today. Take care, and I look forward to talking to you very soon.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.